Okay, I recently had a request to do a hafting of a point that basically looks like an almond. Something easy to make that can be sharpened, but looks very difficult to haft, right? So I'm going to show how to haft this. First, let's look at the measurements. This one is like 2 1/4 by 1 1/8. And the thickness is about 3/8, a little bit more. No, about 3/8. If you do it in millimeters, it's like 28. By about 9. If it was 27, it'd be 3 to 1. So 3 to 1 width to thickness ratio is pretty thick and looks pretty much like an almond. All right. There are a lot of artifacts actually in this category of this size and shape. So don't be too upset that this is all you can make. Now the way to sharpen it is with a slight bevel. See how it has a little bit of a twist to it? So what I did was, once you get the almond shape, you just pressure flake it. Let's see. You just pressure flake it in one direction. You know, you run a series of flakes down, turn it over, run a series of flakes down, flip it over if there's some weird sticking out spots, and pick those off. And you end up with, you know, kind of a bevel here, so it'll scoop it out. You can see how it's scooping it out. The bulbs will scoop it out, and when you flip it over and do the same thing, the bulbs will scoop it out on this side too. And you'll end up with a thin, relatively thin edge right at the edge, so it will be sharp. Okay, down here on the stem, I ground it down a little bit, and you'll see why. It's because of the hafting, so it won't cut the hafting that I'm going to put on. But yeah, it's just pretty typical of many archaic points. And I made the foreshaft ahead of time. This is ash. All right, this is the thick part. This is the thin part. You haft onto the fat end of the stick. Now, the diameter of this is going to depend on your application. If it's a small little dart, it does not have to be very big, but if it's a spear point, this is going to be a lot fatter. Right now it's like a 1/2 inch. Yeah, 12 millimeter, between 12 and 13 millimeter. This is pretty average, okay? This is the average size. I got another one. Where is it? This one's a little bit thicker. They range in size. I have a bunch of notes on artifacts that are still hafted in their hafts, and they've got foreshafts that I can measure. And it ranges, but the average is about this size. This is a little bit large. This would be maybe for a handheld spear. Now, with handheld spears, I see a lot of points hafted directly to the main shaft of a handheld spear, but I think most of them had foreshafts, even on handheld spears that were not thrown with an atlatl or thrown like a javelin. They were just handheld and used like that. I think a lot of them did have foreshafts. In fact, most of them I think did, because I don't see any evidence to the contrary. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so this is at the large end. Yeah, it's not quite 3/4. What is it? 3/4 is like 6/16. I don't know. But 1/16 less than 3/4. That's about the widest that I would use for an atlatl dart. Okay, so I'm going to haft it to this, and I'm going to do it the way I do it, and the way that I've seen. All right, you'll notice that this has got striations. I'm going to do this in a combination of what I've seen on artifacts and the way I do it. Okay, now on artifacts I have seen these striations on the foreshaft, and they're made with a stone tool. You just, pretty simple, get a flake and you do this, and I put them across here too. All right, flat bottom. The flat bottom notch gives you a lot of options because it allows for maneuverability at the bottom to align the point, especially with these clunky points. A lot of times you need to really push to one side or whatever, maneuver it a lot to get it to fit right. Sometimes you have to push them all the way to one side because one side is flat on a lot of these with a striking, or not a striking, a drastic bevel on the other, and you'll have to seat, you know, the bottom next to one corner of the notch. If it's a V-shaped notch, you won't be able to do that, and your point is going to be skewed. With a flat bottom, you got room to move. Okay, that's all I'm saying. You're going to need to widen it out like it's a combination of V and flat bottom. You know, you can't have parallel sides because this is going to be fat. You know, you can do parallel sided notch if you have a thin, skinny point. You know what I mean? Thin and skinny. This is paper. But you know, you can see what I mean. If it's a thin one, you can put parallel sides on it. If not, you're going to have to widen it out. Like this one here is going to have to be widened out. Now you don't want the width or the diameter to be too much larger than the width or the thickness of the point. You want a smooth transition. If it's too fat down here, the combination of being fat and the wrapping is going to create a lot of resistance. Okay, the minimum is 1/8 on each side. Let's see. Let me see what I got. Yeah, the minimum I would go is 1/8 on each side. Okay, and you choose a hardwood, not willow or something that's a soft hardwood, but a hard hardwood. Okay. So on artifacts, I've seen the striations. They can be made easily with the stone tool. The notches can be made with stone tools, and you can actually make one this nice and neat if you take your time. This is not difficult to do. When it's green, you can split it out, and you know there's a technique for splitting out the square bottom notch just by putting in notches in strategic places and then breaking these out. And you can leave the bark on the lower part and shape it later. Just make a bunch of these ahead of time. There are at least 2 sites that have caches of foreshafts already made. So yeah, I would, you know, dry it out a little bit, then shave this top part off. Make a bunch of these ahead of time. You can leave the bark on the lower part. Sometimes it will crack up in here as it's drying if it didn't dry fully, but it definitely will crack if you take all the bark off when it's green, with a few exceptions. Some wood doesn't crack, it doesn't check when drying out, but most of them will. You can see the little pith hole down in there. You got to make sure that's minimal pith. See that? This shoot came from the very bottom of the growth. You want to get it right at the bottom of the growth. You don't want to get it too high up because that pith will be very substantial. You want this to be down low near the ground or near the trunk of the tree so that it doesn't have a big pith. Okay. Let's see. All right, so instead of using the pine pitch glue or whatever, I'm going to cheat and use a glue gun with black hot melt. And yes, they do have black hot melt available. And it's cool stuff. Makes it so much easier. As long as it's working. Yeah, okay. Sometimes these cheap glue guns, they don't feed right. All right. Lots of glue. Now most of these artifacts that I've seen are hafted with asphaltum, some sort of asphaltum glue. You know, asphaltum mixed with gum base or some other sticky substance. A lot of times it's not just asphaltum by itself. They mix it with something. And yes, they did use pine pitch glue, but on the artifacts, for some reason, a lot of them have been tested, and that they're using asphaltum, which is, you know, natural natural petroleum that you find on the seashore, usually by the ocean. And people were trading asphaltum. You don't have to have it in your area to use it. It was used to waterproof drinking vessels and stuff, or baskets for holding water and that kind of thing back in the day. So yeah, use plenty of glue. I can always shave it off if I use too much. Same with the pine pitch glue or whatever you're using. My favorite is asphaltum with the gum base glue. Okay. What is gum base? It's what they make chewing gum out of. So if you really want to be modern about it, it's just roofing tar with chewing gum. But the materials that they would use back in the day would be asphaltum and some sort of gum base, some sort of gum from a tree that produces gum, which is something that remains sticky forever. Yeah, it's a sap that remains sticky forever. That's called. That's what the gum is. Asphaltum by itself, believe it or not, is not flexible and gooey. It's usually very hard and crumbly. Yeah, so you got to mix it with something. All right. A lot of people they don't know that. Okay. Now you can find the gooey stuff floating on the ocean. I've never tried that stuff. I've just tried the hard stuff that washes up and sits on the beach for centuries, and then the humans come around and find it. Yep, and by that time it's already hardened up. Alright, so yeah, it's important to use hot melt. Alright, so that's the preliminary stage. I already got some hafting material made up ahead of time. This is just 6 strands, I think 6 strands of regular sewing thread. It could be 8 strands. Glued together with Elmer's glue or wood glue. Let's see. I think I might have used a Tide Bond on this one, but a lot of times I use the Elmer's. All right. This is a substitute for sinew, because you can make it in any length. See that? This is about 3 feet or 4 feet long. So I'm not going to run out this time. All right. So I soften this up. I'm going to cheat and use my cigar lighter, torch, and get this stuck on here. I should dampen up the wrapping, make it a little bit damp, but oh well. All right, so I would be doing this over a fire to make sure this glue stays warm so it sticks to the wrapping. And I'm going up over the top of the wood. Okay, up over the top. And yes, it's very sticky. All right, this is the preliminary wrap. I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go back up in a minute. Okay. Now with the tight bond waterproof, it won't reconstitute the glue, right? If I make it damp. But with the Elmer's it will. So if you just use Elmer's initially to prepare your sinew substitute, it will stick to itself later. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it down about 1 inch or so. Okay, so let me see. We won't go that far. All right, where's my... I just want to make sure I have enough wrapping. So yeah, I don't tie it off, I just glue it down. And I just add more glue on top of it later. Where's the... There it is. I'm just trying to speed up the drying process. Okay. All right, so I just cut it off and glued it down. Now, up here, that you can stop there with just a little bit of wrapping, but I'm going to wrap it fully. As long as the glue is good, but if the glue is not that great, you do need to put on a substantial amount of wrapping. You got to be careful because sometimes the thread will burn. Sinew won't burn when you're doing this process. It'll cook and get weaker, but it won't burn. Okay, so at this stage, what I can do is I can go up a little bit further and wrap up on the blade. Okay. Make sure I can come down here and wrap at least one time around. At least one time. Before I go back up on the other side. And go up here on the blade. Come back down. Okay, let's do this a little bit better by covering up these glue gaps. Go around once. I don't know if I'm going to have enough. Not even with like 3 feet. Okay. Go up on the blade, come back down. That's just to keep it a little bit more secure. One of the advantages to using tight bond is it won't come off with water. It won't loosen up if you get it wet. But this does not flatten out like sinew does. It's a little bit bumpy, but I just wanted to use this for the video because using the sinew takes too long. Yeah. Okay, so that's how I would do it. Now, have I seen the crosshatch over the top of everything on artifacts? No. They usually just go straight across, and that's it. But me, personally, I would do a wrap up on the blade slightly. Just to keep it more secure and help to prevent it from popping out. Because this kind of hafting with a contracting stem is not a strong haft. You know what I mean? It has a tendency to crack and pop out. Now the way I test to see if it's centered, I just twist it like this, hold it steady here, and make sure that point doesn't move a whole lot. The point up here, if it does, I can move it. Still a little bit warm. That point shouldn't move at all when you do this. See that? It stays pretty still. I'm moving it like this a little bit, but hold on. See how when I spin it, the point stays fairly centered. That's how you center that. Okay, so that's it. Now you can just go straight across and not worry about this cross hatching. But I've hafted these before, and if it's just wrapping straight across, that just pulls right out. You can pull it easily right out. It doesn't push in at all because the wrapping does resist quite well to impact, but it will not resist being pulled out unless you got something else. Okay. Now when you, or if it's sinew and you're waiting for it to dry, you just flatten it out. This doesn't flatten out as well as sinew, but you can see the transition is not, it's not bumpy. There's not a big jump between the stone and the wrapping and the wood. It's fairly smooth, fairly. I mean, there is a jump. You can add more glue over the top of everything to smoothen that out if you want. Okay, so that's how I would do it. If you want to do it like they did with the artifacts, you don't use the cross hatching. Yeah, the artifacts are just like that, with a little bit of glue sticking out of the top, and that's it. Some of them do have glue down here over the wrapping, but that's a much longer process. I've tried that. It works, right? You can put glue over the top of everything, but it's a much longer process. Okay. Hope that answered that question. In cold weather, the glue, the natural glue, cracks easily. In hot weather, the natural glue melts and gets loose. So the ideal temperatures for this are cool weather or at night. You don't want to be hunting with this in the middle of a hot day or during extremely cold weather, unless you've got a way to keep the glue warm until you have to shoot it, which means you can take it off the ladle dart and store these like within your clothing underneath your coat in a pocket between you and your coat. And when you need them, you take them out. The glue is still going to be a little bit warm and it won't be so brittle. That's just my idea. Okay? All right, so there you go. Hafting the walnut. I mean the almond. Okay? All right.